Katie and I have chapter 15 and 16, which is Reconstruction in the Gilded Age, and you're not allowed to judge the drawing because you'll hurt Emma's feelings.
After the Civil War, the South faced a painful economic revival. Over 250,000 men died, the value of property decreased greatly, and work animals, farm buildings, and machinery were destroyed. Many Americans considered the United States a new nation. Because of the abolishment of slavery, questions regarding the meaning of freedom were debated frequently by Americans, and conflict even arose from the differing opinions. Institutions such as free blacks' churches and schools were able to strengthen and grow freely without white supervision. These institutions became a major part of their communities. The rise of independent black churches redrew the religious map of the South. African Americans developed a strong desire for an education, which could eventually lead to them taking part in politics. The first black colleges, including Fisk University, Hampton Institute, and Howard University, were created during the time of Reconstruction. Many African Americans relocated to southern cities or went searching for their families that they had been separated from. Also, widows of black soldiers claimed survivors' pensions, forcing the federal government to acknowledge these pre-war relationships. With the new ideas of freedom, power of black men had increased and their wives had remained at home to devote more time to their families. This created the idea that men and women should inhabit separate spheres. However, with the women remaining at home, poverty of the black community increased, and this forced black women to work for wages. Much of the white South believed that former slaves were free only to labor. White planters were still attempting to create a labor system as similar to slavery as possible, and former slaves were demanding freedom. Despite its successes in education and healthcare, there was not nearly enough representation in the South to solve problems in all areas. Northerners felt that a reconstructed South would soon resemble a free society with public schools, small towns, and independent farmers. Americans would become united, more prosperous, and more powerful. In the summer of 1865, President Johnson, the successor of Lincoln, ordered that almost all land in federal hands be returned to its former owners. This caused outrage from former slaves and freedmen as they were forced to continue to work on white-owned plantations because they faced poverty. The failure of land reform on a federal level produced a strong sense of betrayal. Several new systems of labor emerged in the South. The task system consisted of daily tasks that were assigned to workers for them to complete. Sharecropping allowed black families to rent a part of a plantation, with the crop divided between worker and owner at the end of the year. As time continued on, sharecropping became more and more oppressive and ultimately was ended. Similar to sharecropping, white farmers found themselves stuck in the cycle of the crop lien system. Farmers had to participate in crop lien because their property was destroyed in the war. This meant the farmers used materials from merchants and paid them back with some of the crop they farmed. This did not solve farmers' debt, as it increased with time. Andrew Johnson failed to outline a successful Reconstruction plan. Many Northern Republicans turned against Johnson for the presidential Reconstruction. Violence increased towards Northern visitors, and former slaves increased directly because of Johnson's Reconstruction plan. The Black Codes were the largest reason the North turned against Johnson. The Black Codes granted few rights to former slaves. They could still not testify against whites or serve on juries. If a former slave did not hold a yearly job, they could be arrested and hired out for jobs. Despite all the opposition they faced, Congress passed the 14th Amendment, which guaranteed anyone born in the United States is a citizen who deserves equal protection under the law. The 14th Amendment led to the official Reconstruction Act. The South was divided into military districts, new state governments were created, and black men kept the right to vote. Along with Reconstruction, feminists began to advocate for women's rights. They demanded liberty for married women and divorce laws and control over their own bodies. During Reconstruction, African Americans held 2,000 spots in public office, representing at every level of the government. This largely affected life in the South. Black office holders insisted that African Americans received a fair trial. Opposition to Reconstruction came from the South's traditional leaders, including planters and merchants. They did not want their former slaves voting and holding office. This opposition in the South led to hate crimes against African Americans. The Ku Klux Klan was founded and began to take the lead of the many terrorist organizations. To fight the KKK, Congress passed the Enforcement Acts, which outlawed terrorism and allowed the president to use the army against them. In 1875, Congress passed the Civil Rights Act of 1875, outlawing racial discrimination in public. The Democrats gained control of Congress again, naming themselves the Redeemers. Violence grew where Reconstruction was still strong, and Republicans were publicly murdered. By the end of Reconstruction, African Americans still held office in some places. However, more change would not be seen for many years.
Well, art credits to these two. Well, Emma. Yay! Now, chapter 16 with Katie, eating chicken wings on an episode of Hot Ones. Yay! Yay!
Hi, on First We Feast, this is Katie Leuker in our episode of Hot Ones, the show with hot questions and even hotter wings. Our first guest is John D. Rockefeller.
Yes, first off, I would like to say thank you for having me on the show. It is a big honor. So, first off, I am a big believer in capitalism. I use a method called horizontal integration, where a company, my company, merges with its competitors. And, I am pretty dominant in the railroad industry and oil. I do have a monopoly over the oil industry. And oil companies. And
Do you believe it is unfair that other big business owners, such as J.P. Morgan or Andrew Carnegie, utilize illegal practices to get ahead or for their own personal financial gain?
so let me ask you, what exactly are you referring to? What illegal practices?
Yes, I'm referring to the exploitation of
Okay.
workers and the manipulation of the government for their own financial gain.
Oh, okay, all right. That's a really easy question for me to answer. I am totally against illegal practices and exploitation of my workers. The competition is very busy, very, very competitive right now. But I am proud to say that I have never unfairly treated my workers. I will always treat them fair.
How have you given back to your community?
Right. I've been excited for you to ask me this question. So I have given a lot to my earnings to charity, and I am the founder of University of Chicago.
Our next guest is President Garfield.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me. A lot of Americans wanted to see me on this show. It is quite popular.
Do you believe there is anything wrong with the transformation of the West?
I do not believe there is anything wrong with the transformation of the West. It does provide us with more resources, and it does provide families a new way of living if they choose to go live out there.
So you don't see anything wrong with taking over and controlling Native American lands? Also, could you explain the Dawes Act?
No, sir. The way I think is, I think it'll positively affect our government and our people, and I think that's what matters. Plus, the land belongs to the government, and I even appointed some people to go out and deal with Indian affairs and act as a militia commander. So, I think it's going to have a positive impact. And to continue, the Dawes Act enabled us to break up tribal lands and to redistribute Native American lands.
So, Mr. President, are you ready to eat some hot wings? I didn't get the chance to eat some with Mr. Rockefeller.
Yes, I've been waiting for this. All right, so should we do the Pucker Butt Pepper Company Extra Mean Green Hot Sauce? All right, shake that up a little bit. All right, I am a big hot sauce fan. Dab. That's nice. Not too hot yet.
Could you explain the Battle of Little Bighorn and its importance?
Right, yes. This is very good. Alright. So the Battle of Little Bighorn, sorry, it's getting a little hot. The Battle of Little Bighorn was a decently big loss to our military. About nearly 300 men died, and it was a biggest victory for the Native Americans.
Could you explain the importance of the Interstate Commerce Commission Act and the Sherman Antitrust Act?
So I believe that the Sherman Antitrust Act and the Interstate Commerce Commission are two very important acts that were needed to be passed under my supervision. So these two acts are working on getting rid of trusts and monopolies, and especially in the railroad industry. There are just too many men who are making money illegally from these practices, and overall it just needs to be cut out. Thank you so much for having me on here. It is an honor. I am a big fan of your hot sauces and your hot wings show.
All right, our next special guest is Boss Tweed.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Could you explain a little bit more about Tweed Ring and its significance?
Right. So Tweed Ring, it's my own organization that I founded. We completely dominate New York City politics, of course. And, we've been accused of corruption, but you can't believe that nonsense.
All right, Mr. Tweed, are you ready to try some chicken wings?
Yeah, let's dive into some wings. I am going to pick the hottest one. I'm going to pick the hot ones, the Last Stub Apollo hot sauce. I'm up for the challenge. Yeah, I'm putting a lot on. Delicious.
Is it true that your party organization helped gain new voters by promising them jobs and money?
See, I told you I could handle the strongest. And yes, we did. Sometimes we followed through. It's very competitive in politics. You gotta do what you gotta do.
This seems to be very illegal and corrupt.
Don't ever accuse me of corruption. I'm done here.